Good afternoon to you. Let's make a start. So I'll give you a few moments to read through what today's all about, but I'll also then just take you through that. What we're saying here is despite committed effort and improvements across many aspects of project delivery, business results are still poor. For 30 plus years, we've been unsuccessfully attempting to fix projects across many aspects of project delivery. In this webinar, Alex will walk us through where and how value is destroyed and start to lay out a pathway to improve the value delivered. Alex will explain how a simple mental model, the top value equation, can be applied to improve the delivery of projects. So a little bit about Alex. Is a 30-year plus veteran in the strategy execution domain. She's got vast experience of delivering major technology projects for organizations. She worked together for more than 2 decades with her late partner, Jed Sims, to pioneer new learnable and teachable models, tools, techniques, and processes. They developed top thinking to help every person in every organization execute projects and deliver the value. Incidentally, Totally Optimized Projects was recognized for its innovative intellectual property by Gartner with a Cool Vendor Award in 2011. That's no mean feat. Alex teaches at Melbourne University on innovation and entrepreneurship within IT. She writes for the CEO magazine and was recognized by Cranfield School of Management as one of 50 notable faces for its 50th anniversary celebrations. So hopefully you have now logged into mentormeet.com, and here's a few questions for you. What type of project-related job role do you typically perform? Results that we've got 45% of you are in project delivery specialists and a leadership role. So thank you for that. What term best describes the main focus of the organization in which you work? Typically, we do get quite a few people in construction. Okay, these are a little bit more taxing, but how well do these statements describe your organization? The scale is from 1 to 10. This is part of a managing benefits health check assessment available from APMG's managing benefits. So if you want to do a self-assessment, then please do. And again, you can see the spread of results here. So it's pretty much middle ranking. And thank you for all those who voted. For Alex, I want to say thank you very much. Thank you for giving up your time. And we recognize it's late into the evening where you are.
One of the disadvantages of being on the other side of the world is that people keep forgetting and calling you at 2 in the morning. Anyway, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to speak on a topic that's been very close to my heart for many, many years. So welcome everybody, and I hope that what I have to say will give you some useful strategies and ideas, because one of my great discussions, and in fact it's something that I've talked to many project managers about, is the fact that when projects go off the rails, it's often seen as a project management problem, but in most cases it isn't. So we're going to talk about that and why. Why is it important is because projects are how organizations execute strategy, and every project that you do should incrementally lead an organization to its working just right future. But the problem is that project success rates are poor, and I'm sadly old enough to remember the days when they were poor for different reasons, like you'd get out of bed at 3 a.m. in the morning to fix the data protection on a program that had crashed. And, developing software in COBOL code was enormously difficult. But the bottom line is that we've been fixing projects now for 3 decades, and the results have not improved materially. And I first put this slide together in nearly 15 years ago, and I had a different set of figures that I quoted, but it always goes back to the groundbreaking research that Jed Sims ran for Boston Consulting Group worldwide into value delivered by projects, which was not whether projects delivered on time and on budget, but whether organisations actually got value out of them. And they did this research in a very, very meticulously standardised way, and they came up with the figure that was about 3% of projects that actually delivered value. In 2013, Deloitte did a major study, and they came up with about the same figure. It was about 5%. And every year I look at the Standish report, the chaos report when it comes out, and you know the numbers are not materially improving. So the thing is that we're not getting results, and that's by the orthodox project measures, which is the orthodox definition that success is on time, on budget, and to specification. And less than 40% of projects are successful on that. And I hope by the end of this session I will have convinced you that in actual fact it's perfectly possible to be over time and over budget and still successful. But the top definition of success is the full delivery of the desired business outcomes, the benefits and value. In other words, you get something valuable out of your project. And on that, about 5%, we reckon we've updated the BCG research over the years, and it hasn't materially moved. So even more confusing is this issue about how success is measured, because you can have what is a notable failure by time, cost and budget, which is a wild success if you measure by outcomes, value and value delivered. And that, of course, I'm sure you will all know the famous Sydney Opera House, where we sent the poor project manager, we sent the poor architect back to Denmark in disgrace because of the overruns on the project. And in actual fact, as an opera house, I'm told that the acoustics aren't too good, but as an iconic building that absolutely represents Sydney, incredible, and what value it's added to the economy and the Australian economy over the years. Who would even guess? So it's measuring success is hard. So over the 3 decades, we've applied all of these different fixes. We've fixed project management methods. We've fixed project, all the project software and tools. We've got increasing number of specialists. In fact, these days, if you're in a major organisation, sometimes I think, your base number of people that have to be on a project before you even get started is about 10 or 12, possibly even more. And finally, people are starting to say, gee whiz, we ought to be getting something out of this. And finally, one of the things that Jed always used to say, we're not short of smart people in this project delivery space. So why is it that isn't making a difference? Well, we've got really good at controlling what we have been trying to control, which is time, cost and resources, but getting value is still very elusive. And in fact, if you do a Google search on project success, one of the wonderful articles that I bookmarked was one that says, it's really hard to measure project success. Well, I'm hoping to persuade you that is absolutely nonsense. It's actually really easy. So to solve the problem of how value destruction occurs, we actually set out to understand why and where it happens. And before I talk about that, what I've also got to talk first about is there are 2 meanings of value. There's the broad meaning and the narrow meaning. So let's talk about the broad meaning, what I call the big V. What this is where you obtain the business results and strategic contribution, you get the business reasons for doing the project, and you avoid the downsides of not doing it. So this is where you can have a situation where a compulsory project, a compliance project, does deliver value, because if you don't do it, you lose your license to operate. And that's measured by the outcomes, benefits, and quantifiable value. Then we have what I call the small v version of value, which is the quantifiable value of a benefit in in either dollars or KPIs or as a key performance or as a proxy measure. So we measure little b in monetary terms. My favourite saying, in God we trust, all others must bring data. This came from Demings, who started the whole quality movement. Let me give you some data. And this data came from the original Boston Consulting Group studies, where what they did is they looked at investment. So along the bottom axis is running costs, and up the side is the incremental benefits. And the size of the bubble shows how much people invested. So you can see that some people invested a very large amount and some people invested quite a small amount. What's interesting about this is that look at that little guy on the top left-hand corner. Invested a small amount, ended up with very low running costs as a result, and reaped enormous benefits every year. And you go, what did he do? Because if you look at other people, they invested a very large amount, ended up with very large running costs and almost no returns. So what this tells you is that somehow some people worked out what to do. So what that triggered after that first phase of the report was they went back and did some more investigation. And this is the data. And the question they asked was, where does the value go? Why are some people getting different results? So let's say you start off with your optimum delivery cost of 100%. Well, what they discovered was 25% of it was vaporized because they never put it in the business case. And one of the reasons why things don't make it into the business case is quite frequently people build a business case to the point where they've got enough numbers in there to get approved, and then they go, right, well, the business case, we're never going to look at it again, we just got to get going because the project is what's important. Well, 25% got lost because it was there sitting, waiting to be gained, and nobody did anything about getting it. That's a bit tragic. 5% lost to scope changes. Now that one's interesting because one of the things that, this is actually on a portfolio of projects, but one of the things that people think is that scope changes are enormously damaging to project value. Well, they can be, and I'll explain to you why that's the case, but it's not as much as people think. 5% is lost because you get the benefits and then they don't stick. You know, you implement SAP, you get rid of all those spreadsheets that people are doing all these major mission critical things with, and you go back 18 months later and everybody's back on the spreadsheets again. You go, well, that wasn't such a good idea. So then you end up with roughly 40% of what you could have got, and of that, 20% of it, you got them late because you could have got them very early on in the project, but there is this theory that projects don't deliver benefits. Nobody did anything about it during the life of the project to get them, so you got them late. So we got 40% of what was the available value. Let's look at the cost side. 15% extra cost due to unnecessary rework on projects, 15% due to budget overruns. Yeah, well, 20% due to unnecessarily retained process complexity. My favourite expression when people talk about doing an SAP upgrade is that it's not a dishwasher. You don't take one version of SAP out and slot it into exactly the same floor space that the old one did. You've actually got to look at all the processes that are now capable of being enabled by that new SAP implementation. But the number of times I've gone in and seen major SAP upgrades and nobody's done anything about simplifying processes beforehand. And then 10% because basically you lose the capital for failed projects. So we're basically up to 160% of the actual delivery cost. So basically the value goes down and the costs go up. Right, now let's have a look at when this occurs, because this is when it gets really interesting for project managers. We have our business as usual rolling along in life, and someone's got a bright idea that might turn into a project, so we do a business case and that gets approved. What then happens is that we go into a project delivery phase, and it gets handed over to the business in what I call a big explosion. In fact, this is the diagram I call the big explosion diagram. And there's a bit of post-implementation holdover. And then what the business do after it's been handed back to them is that they spend years getting things working to work again properly. Now, let's look at the numbers. 45% of benefits gets lost before you've even done the business case. Before the business case, 45% during the actual delivery phase, and 30% after implementation. So what that tells me, or should tell you as well, is that most of the value destruction is occurring outside the boundaries of what's the project. So it's also beyond the project manager's control. And what happens is that we're seeing project failures as a project problem, and if we could just get that hero project manager who could just make it all work. But it's actually a business problem. And in actual fact, one of the things that is clear is that project managers can destroy investment returns by allowing costs to overrun, but they can't create value if it was never there in the first place. So basically, no project manager, doesn't matter how heroic, can save a project that's, my favourite phrase, ill-conceived, misconceived, or just plain dumb, which, by the way, is most of the business cases that I've read over my very long career. So, if that's the problem, what's the solution? Well, you need to fix the problem, you've got to have some new thinking models and principles, and I'm going to gallop through this at a great speed, and I hope that you stay with me. The first is that you've actually got to adopt a new mental model for what the endpoint of a project is, because the model that we've got at the moment has come from construction project management. It's the turnkey model. And basically, turnkey projects deliver a capability ready to operate, but not yet on and working. Works okay for roads and buildings, you know, you have the ribbon cutting ceremony and the cars start driving down the road. Works all right for the building, you get the keys to the front door, you can open in, start moving in. It doesn't work well for, or it's incomplete for business or change projects. And basically the metaphor we use to describe that is a brick making factory. And how that metaphor came about is that Top did a lot of work for one of the biggest brick-making manufacturers in the world. And we were talking to the sponsors about this, and they said, it's the difference between the brick-making factory and what I'm going to talk to you about next, which is making the endpoint of your project desired outcomes as the end. Now, the way Top defines desired outcomes, which is not the way that most people talk about when they talk about outcomes, we describe it as a business as usual operational environment working just right. So it has that lovely tempo of things working well. And the metaphor we use is the factory making bricks. To what level? It's to the level of performance that's been agreed by the sponsor with the project manager and defined for the project in the business case. So that's what we say a project should be delivering, working desired outcomes. Now, that changes the project delivery model, because what will then happen is you've got business as usual rattling along, someone comes up with a bright idea, a business case has got to be done, but that between the bright idea and the business case is the pre-business case, where a lot of things can be done to ensure that the project is going to be delivered a valuable one. Then you go into project delivery, and then the last bit of it is where the project actually hands over its agreed working just right business as usual. And what we say is that you can start delivering benefits and tracking the financial model from the day you build it, which by the way is the day you have the bright idea, to where the tracking actually then transfers into normal business as usual operational management. And then you transfer the project back to the business and the project finishes things off. So, shift to delivering outcomes. Now, if you clearly define the outcomes, you can then plan the delivery. And I'm a great lover of Lewis Carroll and full of native wisdom. And this is one of my favourite phrases, where Alice asked the Cheshire Puss, would you please tell me which way I ought to go from here? And the Cheshire Puss says, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And in actual fact, that's what most projects are. They struggle to know where they're going. And when your project doesn't have clear intentions, time and cost overruns simply compound that value destruction. But when you do define the outcomes, you can then identify all the activities to deliver it, because what's happening at the moment is we define all the activities required to deliver the deliverables. For example, the software and some, training and comms and God knows what. But to get a working just right business as usual environment requires more work. Now, that work has to be done. It's got to be done. And whether you say it's right now, we leave it to the project to do, to the business to do in a very disorganized fashion. Basically, what I say is project plan it and have the project manager control all of the activities. What will also happen is you stop doing the things that you don't do, which add no value, which are always on every project, because you're not planning to outcomes. So all activities, including changes in the business, should be project managed. That's the second thing. So now let's talk about measuring project success by the right measure, not the wrong one, because of the fact, if we talk about us in the Opera House, it's a wild success or a wild failure at the very same time. So you've got to start measuring project success by the right measure, not the wrong one. And on time, on budget, to specification, sorry about this, all of you, it's measuring success by the inputs used, not by whether the output results that we desire to achieve. And it's as dumb as measuring the house, the success of your new dream home by whether you've used all the bricks that you've bought. Now just think about that. Now, the reason why we do it is because it's come from construction project management, and the inputs are a proxy measure for progress towards the outputs. And it works okay on construction project management. It doesn't work on business projects. So what you've got to do is start to shift to measure success by value delivered. And the question that we say to people is, do we get the desired outcomes, the benefits and the value, because these are the way TOP defines big V, relative to the optimized inputs used. So it's not that we're saying that time, cost and specification are not important. What we're saying is those are relative to. So the cost of the materials for your new house is relative to whether you achieved what you wanted out of it. Our new house is a real home and will meet our life needs for many years. My partner and I can relax, unwind and enjoy being with the family. Space to care for our elderly children, parents, space for the kids to play. That's what we want out of our house, and that's how we're going to measure its success. Next thing that you've got to understand is the concept of path dependency, which all good project managers know about. And in actual fact, this is something that you can have a very complicated discussion with someone until one day in 2007, I even remember the year, I happened to read an economic newsletter from one of the best economic writers in the world, and he used this term path dependency, and I go, that's the term I've been searching for. So most people know about it, and what it means is implicitly we know when we're trying to get somewhere, there's a right or a wrong point to start. And I will tell, there's a famous Irish joke which I feel that I can tell because I'm quarter Irish. The tourist asks one of the locals for the directions to Dublin, and the Irishman replies, well, sir, I wouldn't be starting from here if I were you. Right? Now, I've just written a blog post which Merv will point you towards. But basically what path dependence does is that it frames decisions so that you maximize the output value. Now, the really neat thing is that if you understand the concept of path dependence and you've defined outcomes, you can actually use outcomes and draw them in a path dependency map so that you can explain path dependency. Now, here's a really neat real life example from Yellow Pages in Australia in 2010, when they knew they had a tiny window of opportunity before Yellow Pages was going to lose. They had to deal with the fact that they had big fat books. Everybody was moving to online. Google was going to eat their lunch unless they developed a coherent digital strategy. So one of the things that they said that they wanted as an outcome for a particular project, Yellow Pages advertisers will see they get a flow of quality leads through our Yellow Pages search network. So they'll be willing to pay it because we want them to continue to pay the $300 or the $500 or the $1,000 a year that they pay. What do we need for that to happen? Well, the first thing that's got to happen is searchers seeking suppliers see our data as number one on the search results, and they're confident that they get the most appropriate information to help them to find a business to meet their needs. So I want a plumber in my local area. I don't want one in the other half of the country. That's the kind of thing, right? So that the searchers are finding the people. Now, in order for that to happen, we've got to do some stuff. Google, people obviously key in plumber in Gisborne into Google. So third-party publishers like Google access our business data through an API, and revenue sharing creates incentives for third parties to actually come to us and get plumbers in Gisborne. And as a result, usage of our data grows. And also, we continually improve the results to make sure that we benefit the advertisers and searchers, et cetera, et cetera. And guess what? At the beginning of that, we've got this horrible little piece of awful technology buried in the bowels of our systems, which is constraining us because we can't actually make it do what we want so that it will talk to Google. So we want to get rid of that. It's constraining us, and we make a seamless changeover. So we want to get to one point, but we've got to start at a certain point. That path dependency enables you to have a very useful and complex conversation with the business that says, okay, this piece of software down here at number one doesn't sound like it's very important, but I can tell you, we can't do what you need to do in business terms unless we sort it out. One of the things that also happens when you understand path dependency is that actually sequencing becomes more important than priority for most activities. Doing things in the right order, not because they're on the critical path or they're constrained by resources, but because they allow you to start incrementally building your future. That's what path dependency allows you to do. And if you go to Wikipedia, this is the codified definition of path dependency. It explains how the sets of decisions and options you've made possible at any point in time is limited by the decisions you've made in the past. Now, one of the things that I tell people is every decision you make determines what you can't do now and in the future. I have seen steering committees make path-dependent decisions where I say to them, if you make this decision, you might as well stop the project right now because you can never get to where you want to be. You can never get there. So just stop. Don't make the decision. Just stop. Right. Next point I want to talk about. We treat project problems as if they're a project problem. And if you do, you will always have problem projects, because one of the mindsets is we think projects fail in the sort of project and program delivery. But in actual fact, there are 4 lenses that you've got to look at, and these lenses are perspectives. And those perspectives are, how do we invest capital to execute strategy? How do we define, lead and direct projects to achieve value? How do we deliver the project, and what technology we need? Now, we're actually not too bad at delivering projects, by and large, or certainly project managing them. Most organisations are reasonably good at capital investment, but what they're not very good at is defining and leading projects and directing them so that they achieve value. Now, the thing is each of these lenses has their own series of processes. The strategy investment lens has things about portfolio investment management and project portfolio management. The business value lens has processes around ideas initiation, simplification, creating a business case and change delivery. So these, and what we've got to do is shift our primary focus actually to the business processes that are required to deliver value. And once that happens, then project managers actually get a much better specification and leadership and support for them to do an effective job. Now, the other thing that you have to do is that you have to switch from tacit knowledge to codified knowledge. Tacit knowledge is that unwritten, unarticulated knowledge that people know, and it's often the thing that people think that they know about, but they don't actually. So you can have a meeting where you have sponsors and steering committees and project managers, all project people all around the same room, and they're all using the same language. And I can be sitting there and going, they're all talking about completely different things. Whereas when you make explicit or codified what it is that you're trying to achieve, it makes it really easy for everybody to be on, having the same picture in their heads instead of having a bit of a puzzle. But you need processes that enable you to do that. It doesn't happen by accident. And the last, almost the last thing I want to talk about is you have to deliver working end-to-end business processes, not systems. This diagram I just popped in was one that we did when in 2005 when one of the Australian retailers was just starting to do B2B. And it was a project that we were asked to do a health check on, and it was plain, even though it had only been going 6 months, they had no clue what they were doing. So basically what we got them to do is to sit down and we said, okay, what you're actually doing is that you are shifting information across processes end to end electronically instead of by paper. That's what you're doing. So let's map up the processes. And by the way, let's also look at all of the ways that the system, the different system portfolios they had at the time get involved in this process. Well, that process, that simple diagram changed their whole view about what they were trying to do with B2B because they were completely stuck. I recently, about 3 weeks ago, teaching on the Innovation and Entrepreneurship lecture at Melbourne University, and I got them, we were doing process innovation, so I got all the students to map parking meter processes because they've changed from those things where you poke your spare change in to an app where you key in a code on the from the street side. And at the end of it, these are all Masters of IT students, and I said to them, how many of you guys have ever, and girls have ever mapped processes? And one person put up their hand. And I thought, how can you deliver systems if you have no idea what the business processes look like? And by the way, this is one of the issues with Agile. Anyway, so the other thing that we've got to do is we've got to change the traditional way in which business and IT engage, because what's happening at the moment is business functions are throwing the problem over the wall, and they're hoping that the IT heroes are going to solve it, and the IT professionals are supposed to read the minds of the sponsor, a miracle occurs, and they produce a solution. And what we're saying is you can't solve this problem between what the business wants, improve business performance and dollars in the bank, and what the project is doing by heroes. You know, there's a gap. And right now we say, get a super project manager, or we hope for the best, or a miracle occurs. What we actually need is systematic processes for ensuring that the project activities and the business intentions stay aligned. So, what's needed? What's needed is tools, techniques, and processes for codifying value and executing strategy through projects. That's what's needed. And processes that everybody can do. So the business can do them to give the project people a clearer specification of what it is that they want the project people to achieve for them. The project manager lands with an incomprehensible, unreadable business case, and he goes, what the hell am I supposed to do? He should be able to use exactly the same processes to get the business to give him a clear definition of what they want. And that's what we call top thinking. Learnable and teachable knowledge in the form of models, principles, tools and techniques and processes which make it easy for organisations and all their staff to execute strategy. And what I say about it is you need to bring your brain, you need to bring something to write on, something to write with, and some people to work with to do this. But it is very, very rigorous. And the model that we use to try and shift people away from the idea of, I'm not going to mention that cost benefit thing, except I have to, is we say what you want to do is you want to do a value equation. And this model is something that has been developed over 69 years of practical strategy execution experience in major organisations. So let me walk you through it. Basically what we say is that what you're trying to deliver is outcomes, working just right, business as usual environment. Precise, measurable and carefully crafted statements that explain exactly what the future looks like when you achieve it. Benefits, and there are 6 types of those. They start with customer, competitive, capability, productivity, financial, and then risk avoidance benefits. And then value. Now we're talking about value in little v terms. Financial value and also non-dollar measures such as KPIs and proxies. And then finally, how to achieve it. All of the change activities required to deliver the outcomes, benefits and value. Because once you've done that, you can then say, okay, well, now we can do a much better job on costing. And then we can start to answer the questions, is it worth it? Can we do it? And is this the right time? Let me walk you through a really simple little example. This is a real live one. Major international company, MRI scanners, servicing these MRI scanners, and for various reasons related to all sorts of complexities about warranty, sometimes took them up to 4 months for an invoice to be raised. Each invoice was a very large sum of money, and they were going out late. So one of the outcomes, there were 7 for this particular project that was defined, was we accurately invoice all service calls within 24 hours. Now, there was a lot of debate about whether it needed to be 24 hours or 3 days. There was a whole pile of argy-bargy about that, but they decided 24 hours is what they wanted. So let's have a look at what a value equation looked like for them. The desired outcome was accurately invoicing all service calls. The associated business benefits, this is not all of them, I'm just summarising some of them. Well, reduce working capital because invoices are raised earlier and collected faster with fewer delayed payments. Reduce level of customer billing complaints. You can imagine what would happen when the CFO of a hospital gets an invoice for $50,000 6 months after the service call. Not happy. And reduce levels in invoices written off to disputes, because the first thing you would do is say, I'm not happy. And then a calculated value. This one is not the real value, but we show people how to build a financial model to do that. And then what are the value drivers? Well, because these are the things that go into the model, amongst others, invoices outstanding, average value, number of days, interest rates. And then finally, what are the change activities required to deliver the outcomes, benefits and value? Well, got to redefine the warranty policy, re-engineer the process for raising service invoices, et cetera, et cetera. So the desired outcomes define what you want to achieve. And what we say about them is these statements are carefully crafted to define the new business as usual operational states to be achieved, and include everything which is important to exist after the end of the project when everything is working just right. Now, how do we do that? How do we read people's minds? Well, we have a technique which we call Oracle and Scribe, and we call it getting a person's brain on the page. This one came from that census example before, where we say, okay, well, they said, yeah, we're going to replace the search platform. Okay, tell me more about that. Give me some things. Improve relevancy of Yellow Pages search results. Streamline the internal accessibility. And they give me a bunch of things. All right, let me ask you about the next one. Why is this important? They give me some more things. Ask them another question. Why is this one important? Streamline internal accessibility. They give me some more stuff. And you keep asking, you keep following through asking questions to using a special Socratic questioning technique. And eventually what happens is you end up with someone's brain on a page, which is, in effect, a tangle of thoughts and ideas linked by association. That can take, I literally did it this morning with a client, and that can take about 30 to 40 minutes. But then this is the really neat bit, because what we do is we get them to do a jigsaw puzzle sort, which is basically what you do is you take all of the ideas that you've written down and just basically sort and cluster them so that you can start to see the structure. So for example, okay, I've got something about a whole pile of things about internal access. Well, that's good. And I've got something about third-party access. That makes sense. And I've got some stuff about user satisfaction. That makes sense. And I've got some stuff about advertiser return on investment. That makes sense. Okay. I can start to see what's missing. And then I can use all of those words that were on that previous page to craft these outcome statements. That's where they came from. Because what they do is they summarize in a nutshell all the working just right from that previous 2 steps. And that, having done that, what you've then got is a document that you can put in front of steering committees, new project members, users, and say, this is what we're trying to achieve. Does this make sense? The other thing is it also gives people an idea of how the work is going to be delivered over time. And then here's another really neat thing that you can do, because you can actually link benefits and value to outcome. So from this, we can see money is going to flow out for outcomes 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it flows in when you get to 5. Right? Now, there are additional slides at the end of this pack where we talk about how to define benefits, value, and change activities. I don't have time to go through those, but you can get the slide pack, and I'm also providing a link so that if you want to download my draft book on the topic, you're welcome to do that. In summary, what we say is that you can do a value equation, and it can be done by the business, it can be done by the project, and what's more, you can do it at any stage of a project. You can do it at the beginning of a project, you can do it, we've actually even done it, to remediate a project where they'd finished implementing, all the project specialists had gone, and they had left an organisation absolutely broken. So we did it in order to work out what the path was to get that organisation working again. If you'd like to know more, you can download the pre-publication book of the version of the book just at that link. I'm doing a workshop on the 31st of October in London, where I'm actually going to take people through defining outcome, defining a value equation. And what we do is we get people to bring their projects, and we bash the project into shape. And I'm also speaking at Synergy on the 1st of November. Questions?
Alex, we know you got into full flow on that because we previously talked about putting in some more Mentimeter slides. So what I'm proposing to do as we wait for questions to come in is just kind of review those, and it may be that you want to comment on them as people vote. So back to Mentimeter, folks, and I thought initially I'd take you back to the results around these statements, how you deal with benefits in your organization. So you can see, as I said before, pretty much middling on these the next question we'll ask now, I know one or two of you people got to it before, but whose problem is it that projects don't deliver their potential value? So just have a few moments to think about that and to let us know your observations.
Yes, yep. Sponsors, yes. Well, one of the interesting things, I'll just talk a little bit about the whole role of project sponsorship, is that when people are allocated to steering committees, there is a belief that people know what they're supposed to do, and in actual fact, very few people know what they should be doing. If you haven't defined outcomes for a project, it actually means that the project sponsor is not in control of the project and leading the project. And indeed, one of the things that happens with projects is that they, the steering committees feel that their role is to sort of super project manage the project manager, and that's not what they should be doing. What they should be doing is defining the value, providing clear leadership, making it easy for the project manager to get the resources and actions that they need in the business, so that the project manager can do their role effectively.
Okay, that's great, and clearly sponsors one out there. Let's go to the next question. Which of these activities is most likely to improve project success? So I think this might be something of a loaded question at this stage in the presentation, but let's run it anyway. You can see that we've summarized it into 4 areas: project management methods and disciplines, software and tools, highly skilled specialists, and you see there I've taken the type from that we saw earlier, the business analysis and change managers. That's where your benefits people sit within our project delivery capability framework. So any quick observations on that one?
I do. Okay, so we're now starting to have this new person called a benefit management with that. Benefits management, or delivering benefits, it should be an accountability, not a role. So in other words, somebody who's a line manager, an operational manager in the business, who has direct control over either a cost center budget or a profit center budget, should be accountable for delivering whatever's agreed with him by the project sponsors. Trying to put a person in as a benefits manager when they actually have no authority and don't control the levers, it's an impossible situation. They can't do it. Yeah.
I think we could have quite a long discussion about that. I would tend to talk about a benefits management function that is that people are contribute to or are part of. So okay, just drawing towards the end now, and a couple of open questions. In your experience, what should the end point of the project be? So interesting to see what comes in as we move through. We might just leave you to fill that one in your leisure. I have got a couple of questions now I'll dive to, but what we really encourage you to do, if you would,
BAU, like that,
we're really looking for some reflective practice here. So we want to know what you've learned or do differently as a result of attending this webinar. So, and what I know a number of you asked about the slides, you've asked about recordings, they'll all be made available. And of course, we know that towards the end of next month, then you're in this country, I believe, or Europe for a couple of weeks. Is that right, Alex?
Yes, I'm basically the whole. I arrive on the 29th of October, and I'm in the Northern Hemisphere until about the 5th of December.
Okay, that's brilliant. So, and I suppose on that line, just to segue into maybe a couple of questions, we've got one here. Do you have any top clients within the UK?
I have to say that there are a lot of people who are using TOP individually as what I call evangelists. And some of you may know this very complicated story about the fact that that Jen and I were actually building a worldwide group of people, and then everything went pear-shaped when he died very suddenly. So I know that it's been used in lots of organisations, but because people just help themselves, and they've been going to what were the online courses, which are still available. People are just using the stuff, and I'm actually not aware unless they come back to me as to who's doing that. So we are now in the process of starting to try and build a community. There's a very active community in Denmark, where it's been used in some of the banks there. There's a very active community in the Netherlands, where it's been used in some of the major public organisations there, and a couple of the universities, not for teaching, but actually doing their own strategy implementation. And it's also being used, I know that it's being used in the US in Boeing, for example. But apart from that, I know who's using it, I don't know where they're using it.
Okay, maybe we can squeeze in 2 more questions if the answers are relatively quick. So one of those we've got here is Agile continually discusses value, but you say that Agile gets things wrong. Can you elaborate?
Okay. Look, I think, don't get me wrong, because I know that there's, the moment people are either on the, we love Agile, it's the best thing since sliced bread, or we hate Agile, it's completely useless, right? Now, I actually think that Agile is a very, very good technique if you are developing software. And if you do 2 things, which is, if you define the desired business outcomes, because that acts as a filtering mechanism for when people are trying to work out what the minimum viable product should be and what should be in the sprints. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, if you do what we say people should do, which is do the end-to-end processes, then it's actually really easy to then say, and this is what we want the systems to do, and therefore it's really easy to work out what should be in the sprints, right? And in actual fact, right now, I'm in the process of, there's an organisation I'm helping in Melbourne, which is a major organisation, 600 million turnover a year. So it's big business, 5,000 staff, and they are doing a CRM and an on-app, on mobile device app for their service staff to go out and service when they go out to do the calls in people's homes. They actually service disability, the support workers for disability, right? And they are struggling with their Agile development. What we are actually doing right now is we're mapping processes. What we're then going to do in about 4 weeks' time is we're going to go back to the 2 project teams and say, right, this is the way we see the end-to-end process, the very one that starts at the customer and goes all the way through to when the person gets paid. That's what the end-to-end process works. So this is what we need to make sure that you're going to develop as part of the sprints. Is that what you're doing? Let's make sure that we're all on the same page. We're literally doing that. Yep.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Alex. I think then just kind of bringing this to a close. Thank you for your to everyone who's attended and participated through Mentimeter. We will look at those results. We've got a little initiative underway to actually properly analyse those. So we'll be doing that and feeding that back to you. A couple of additional webinars in our Effective Benefits Management series. So on the 11th of October, we have Dr. Ben Shinoy, who's going to talk about discovery-led decision-making, and I believe you'll find that absolutely fascinating. And then some advance notice, we haven't yet published this webinar, but on the 25th of October, we're going to be involved with the IPA, Infrastructure and Projects Authority, on the launch of their government standard for project delivery. So that's a kind of a must attend one on the 25th October, but look out for that one. And Alex did mention an article she's written that will go on APM's community blog. We'll sort out afterwards when that's going to go, but please read that and share that with others. So time is up. Alex, a really big thank you to you for that, and we'll enjoy looking through some of the material.
Glad to have the opportunity. And if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to come back to me and link to me on LinkedIn. I accept all the invitations that I get. And if you've got any positive comments or rude ones about the handbook when you download it, please send me those as well. Don't send me typos, because I know about those.
Okay, that's brilliant. Okay, lovely. Have a good day.
Thank you all.